2, 1. Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel. Hi, Sugar. This is Uncle Ken.
I tell you what, Ken, you're the best. You're the absolute best. Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction there, Ken. And I like to welcome, we all like to welcome our listeners. Thank you for joining us on our podcast entitled Reading with Uncle Ken. Now, at the moment, we're on part 22. We're reading from chapter 8 entitled The Bullet. And I'm Dr. Silkman, and I'm from the Foul Play team. And for those who are new to joining us on our podcast, look, welcome, guys. It's great to see that you're here. And what we're doing in the podcast is I am reading specific passages from Ken Kratz's book entitled Avery, The Case Against Stephen Avery and What Making a Murderer Gets Wrong. And I'm reading from the updated edition. This is the ebook that was published in 2019. So the whole purpose of the podcast is that we can get to dissect Ken Kratz's masterpiece book. And so I look at specific passages and I get the feedback from the panel. And the other important thing, guys, is if you have questions, please write them down in the chat and we'll try and answer them during the podcast. Well, look, guys, all of us from the Foul Play team want to say a big thank you. We have 1,530 subscribers, and that is awesome considering we're still very young in the game, in the field, and, we stand on the shoulders of giants and we're trying to do our very best to see justice for both Brendan, Stephen, and, of course, Teresa as well. And if you check out our YouTube channel, our Discord channel, and also our website, we have a huge amount of material on both of these cases. We also cover other cases as well. We have an open mic session that's conducted by Jack61, and he looks at various aspects of both these cases as well as other cases. And so we have accumulated a lot of YouTube videos and presentations on our YouTube channel. So, guys, if you like what we do, we all invite you to subscribe. If you like our podcast, please give us a thumbs up. And just to let you know that at the moment we've got 63 little Netflix clips, which is basically a summary. I've taken a lot of controversial bits and pieces from both MAM 1 and MAM 2. I'm only allowed 3 minutes at a time. So what I've done is I've edited them to put a lot of material together, useful material together. So if you're new to the case or you want a refresher, those Netflix clips are really, really good and really, really helpful. And if you notice, I've also included in my final one that I've put up, essentially all about a case that occurred in 1993-94 about the West Memphis 3. Now, if you don't know anything about this case, I really urge you to have a look at a film called The Devil's Knot, which in essence is a recreation of what took place during the trials. And this involved the murder of 3 8-year-old boys, Stephen Branch, Christopher Byers, and James Moore, back in 1993. And 3 youths were arrested, Damien Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly. And they were sentenced to life imprisonment, and Damien Eccles was sentenced to death. So it's a very, very interesting story. And the reason why I mention it is that there are many, many disturbing parallels to both the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases. It's the same type of issues that we see in the case that we're studying now compared to what happened in the West Memphis 3 trials. It really, truly is shocking. So it's almost like a prelude to what happened in the Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey cases. So I've only really just commenced studying the West Memphis 3, but I tell you, it truly is quite eye-opening and shocking. All right, guys. Well, welcome everyone, and joining me on the panel, and please introduce yourselves so people can hear your voice. We have Alice.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining.
We have Bibi.
Hey everyone.
We have Checking Convictions.
Good morning, everybody.
We have Jack61.
Greetings and salutations.
We have Just Rhonda.
Hey everyone.
We have Neverly.
Good morning.
We have Zoe.
Hi everyone.
And we have Sammy.
Hola.
And I believe Checking Convictions, Zoe and Sammy, and probably others, will be checking the chat. So if you've got any questions, guys, don't hesitate to ask. Well, look, guys, welcome to the podcast. What we'll do, we'll make a start. Now, remember, Chapter 8 is entitled The Bullet. And we're, of course, talking about 2 bullet fragments that were found in Stephen Avery's garage as a result of the interrogation of Brendan Dassey. And remember, it was investigator Mark Wiegert who directly asked Brendan Dassey who shot her in the head. And if you have seen the interrogation, it goes for many, many hours, and Checking Convictions will back me up on this. It's a very, very painful interrogation to watch and go through. It's heartbreaking. But what do you reckon, Checking Convictions? Would you agree?
100%. Very hard to watch.
Yeah, it really is very, very hard to watch. Now, it was Mark Wiegert who asked Brendan Dassey who shot her in the head, because the investigators were getting really, nervous, anxious, because Brendan wasn't mentioning any type of shooting scenario. Now, remember that the state had allegedly found cranial bone fragments with evidence of 2 gunshot wounds. And so what they were trying to do is to come up with a narrative to account for these gunshot wounds. Lo and behold, they went back into the garage, Stephen Avery's garage, and lo and behold, they found 2 bullet fragments, item FK and item FL. Item FK was very badly damaged. They couldn't actually trace it to any weapon. And Culhane, who was the DNA analyst in this particular case, could not find any DNA on that bullet. So item FK was basically useless to the case. However, they found another bullet, item FL, and we have discussed item FL many, many times. The thing about item FL was that Cherie Culhane noted no blood, no stain, no tissue on the bullet. However, it produced the full genomic DNA profile of Teresa Halbach. So quite clearly, what the state was trying to do is to tie the Marlin Glenfield Model 60 rifle, which was in Stephen Avery's bedroom, with item FL and with the death of Teresa Halbach. So basically, they were implying that it was Stephen Avery who had shot Teresa Halbach at least twice in the head. Okay, so what we'll do, so that's to bring everyone up to speed. So guys, what we'll do, we'll start the podcast proper. So remember, we're talking about the bullet fragments. And I quote, This is from Ken Kratz's book. Predictably, the defense argued that the bullet had been planted. Avery's rifle was locked up in the state crime lab in Madison by the time the bullet was found. But surely, so the conspiracy theorist argument followed, police could have picked up a bullet from the ground somewhere and planted it in the garage. So that's a very interesting thing for Ken Kratz to say in his book. So here's the question to the panel. Did Kratz just provide a clue in what likely happened with item FL? And Kathleen Zona believes that is exactly what occurred. Jack61, would you like to start?
Sound like a confession. Sound like a confession to me. I don't know about you, Doc. That was that was a confession.
The remarkable thing, and our listeners will note that Ken Kratz has got so many embedded confessions in his book. It's just not funny. And this reads perfectly like an embedded confession. What do you reckon, Jack61?
Absolutely. Plus, he also told a real lie there because it wasn't Stephen Avery's gun. It was Raleigh Johnson's gun.
Correct. There were two rifles in Stephen Avery's bedroom that were hanging on a rack. And remember, it was Roland Johnson's actual trailer that he was renting out to Stephen. And the weapons belonged not to Stephen, but to Roland Johnson. Bibi, do you have a comment?
I don't believe he even bothered to embed that one. That one's just straight up confession.
Correct. And it's rather remarkable that Ken Kratz is so brazen in his statements. Checking convictions. Do you have a comment? Thank you.
Well, I just have to agree with you. He says it like it's just, matter of fact, and it's just like nothing, like kind of, so this is what happened and blah, 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 blah. He doesn't have no conscience about what he says.
Correct, 100% correct, which is interesting because earlier on in the chapter, remember how he said, oh, look, there was snow on the ground, so, there's no way that someone could have come across and walked across the snow and then got the bullet and planted the bullet, right? But then, amazingly, he says, and I quote, police could have picked up the bullet from the ground somewhere and planted it in the garage with a question of checking convictions. Do you have a comment?
Yeah. Walk across the snow. They wouldn't have had to do that. They were there before the snow. Raleigh Johnson said that he had how many bricks, bullets?
He had 3,000 bullets.
Yeah. Okay, 3,000 bullets shot around that whole area. I mean, Steve had to pick him up before he mowed the lawn. We know that there was red on the garage. So when he got tested, we did see what happened there. So I believe he just said, yep, they picked it up, not in the snow. He left that part out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And, let's think about it, guys. When Kathleen Zona went back to Stephen Avery's garage, remember she did the reconstruction experiments, there was evidence of bullet holes that were through and through bullet holes into the garage. And what Kathleen Zona speculated was someone picked up a bullet from one on the ground in the garage from one location and threw it under the green compressor. There's your item FL, right? The mere fact that there was item FK proved that there were bullet fragments in the garage on the floor, right? So finding another bullet like item FL, spent shell, is no surprise at all. But Ken Kratz actually complemented what Kathleen Zona now believes, that a bullet had gone through the garage, fell to the ground at one part of the garage, an officer picked it up and simply placed it underneath the green compressor. checking convictions.
Yeah, a question from Angie Dickinson, who said, did they ever find fingerprints on the gun?
Oh, well, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, they didn't check for fingerprints on the. They didn't do fingerprint analysis actually on the Marlin Glenfield Model 60 rifle, but they found no DNA belonging to Stephen Avery, no DNA belonging to Teresa Hallbach, and they found no blood on the rifle. Because if you shoot someone, you get blowback of blood, small micro droplets of blood. So there was no evidence of any DNA from both Stephen, Teresa Hallbach, and there wasn't any blood. Now, why do you think they wouldn't check for fingerprints? Jack 61.
Well, to answer that question, I would say if you don't want to know the answer, don't ask the question, kind of thing.
Yeah.
100% correct. Because you see, if the state are alleging that it was Stephen Avery who fired the Marlin Model 60 rifle to kill Teresa Hallbach, what happens if they found the fingerprints belonging to Roland Johnson or someone else, right? It wouldn't fit their theory. So they actually did not check for fingerprint analysis. Jack 61.
Just just a thought about the radiopaque particles that they found on the skull fragments. So whoever used that, they're saying that rifle, they would have had to have been relatively close, I would think, for those particles. You think of a rifle, you're going to shoot something at distance, not necessarily something close up, right? So
Correct.
If they were that close to impart those radiopaque particles, you would think there would be some kind of blowback of blood or something.
Correct. What was interesting, Jack 61, was that the blood splatter expert showed that when a bullet strikes skull or goes through tissue that's full of blood, like a brain, you get micro droplets of blood. So you get also blowback as well. Right. There was no evidence of any blood on the barrel, right? But it's interesting that they did not check it for fingerprints, mainly because they just didn't want to know that if it wasn't Stephen Avery's fingerprints, how were they going to explain it, right? But the reality is they can't tie the rifle to Stephen Avery. But there's no question the rifle did fire item FL. No question, because they could check the rifling, the landing, and the groove pattern on the bullet. It came from that barrel. But Roland Johnson admitted firing at least 3,000 rounds from that rifle. So is anyone here surprised about item FL? Anyone here surprised that it would be in the garage? Jack 61.
None whatsoever. The dust-free bullet, by the way. Yeah, none whatsoever.
Correct. But what is interesting was how Ken Kratz nefariously tried to tie the bullet to the murder and to the death of Teresa Hallbach, right? He never said it. He implied it. Checking convictions.
Yeah, well, he never said it, but his experts did. So let's make that clear. But he had to have something that, because Brendan said, who shot her in the head? And he said he did. Well, he had to have something. So you have to have a bullet. That's why they went back so long afterwards and automatically found a dust-free bullet that, by the way, must have went through the wooden gnome in the yard and not Teresa.
Correct. And here's the problem, especially for the new people listening in. The state never microscopically examined the bullet, or if they did, they never said what the results were. And so what happens is when a bullet strikes skull bone, a .22 bullet becomes, you get bone shards embedded in the lead because the lead is actually quite soft. And it's obviously, it's quite obvious that the state itself did not check the bullet microscopically to see if there were bone shards on the actual bullet. However, Kathleen Zellner's expert, Dr. Chris Palahniuk, he did microtrace analysis, and he showed that idomethil had no bone shards, it had wood shards, red paint flecks, wax, and cotton fibers on it. And the important thing is this, that bullet never struck bone. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yes, good morning, Dr. Silkman.
Good morning.
At one point, I was thinking that because the whole case is bizarre to me, and I'm sure other people would agree, it's very hard to believe the validity of the investigation, any test or test results, or the players and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
at one point, I'm like, hey, they got the gun. Who's to say that they didn't just fire one bullet somewhere, while the gun was in the crime lab? But then, I think that you went over this before, then
Yes.
that particular bullet wouldn't have the red paint on it and whatnot.
Correct.
And for
Correct.
them, how silly, how cocky, silly or cocky, I don't know, foolish or I don't know how to call it anymore.
Arrogant.
For them to claim something that like, oh yeah, it matched Teresa's DNA,
Correct.
thinking that, hey, what if this ever gets tested again? You know what I mean?
That is 100%. And that
I
is
don't
something,
understand that part.
yeah, it is something that they never banked on, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, during the trial, obviously Strang and Buting never had the thought of retesting idomethil, right? And you can't really blame them because no one had ever thought of doing microtrace analysis, right? Whereas Dr.
Yeah.
Chris Palahniuk did, right? He's got the special equipment and technology and microscopes to examine the bullet under high power. I don't think Dean Strang and Buting had ever thought of doing that. And let me tell you right now, so devastating was the findings of Chris Palahniuk that Ken Kratz had to write new chapters in his book, which of course we will cover, right? And Ken Kratz is now walking backwards. He's now walking away from item FL. He's like a slippery eel, right? He used it to great effect in court, and it was devastating for Stephen and devastating for Brendan. Now, Ken Kratz is running away from idomethil because he knows he can't tie it to the death of Teresa Halbach. Guys, does anyone have a comment?
Well, there's a couple questions or comments. One, did Ken Kratz get an editor, or was it all embedded confessions pointing out to him? That's just a comment. And
yes.
Mystical Jinx says they could have planted one and found one, meaning the bullets, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, but I don't. But here's my thoughts. I don't believe idomethil is a planted bullet per se. It is a planted bullet in terms of it was likely picked up from one location and placed in another. And the reason why they put it under the green compressor is for them to have a sort of a get-out clause to say, well, when we checked it the first time round, it was hidden. We never saw it. However, I believe that there are photographs that were taken very early on in the investigation that clearly show there was nothing underneath the green compressor. Jack 61, do you remember those photos or checking convictions? Do you remember those photos?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think actually Mystic Jinx put some up on our Discord channel. There's nothing under the green compressor, right? And the other important thing is, remember, they jackhammered the concrete. That's going to cause vibrations, which potentially could dislodge a bullet that's in the wall, right? And so what is interesting is this. The state now have got a bullet, idomethil, that's got no bone shards, wood shards, red paint, wax, cotton fibers, and Teresa Horbuck's DNA, right? They now can't explain item FL, but Kathleen Zellner can. It now looks really, really dodgy for Culhane. Checking convictions.
Yes, the Londoner. Did the cops use cadaver dogs inside their property or garage?
I believe that there were cadaver. Well, I know that I can't remember whether they were cadaver dog or scent dogs, but they were definitely at the garage and they were definitely in Stephen Avery's trailer. If you read the reports, they're a little bit contradictory. The dogs did not hang around the garage. The dogs went, believe it or not, went between Stephen Avery's residence all the way down to Cuss Road. They went across the cornfield and they also hit strongly on the berm at the back of Stephen Avery's property. They didn't really hang around his trailer nor the garage, right? They went to other locations, which is very, very interesting. Checking convictions.
Yeah, and the Londoner says the cops' statements reference junk 2 feet deep in the garage, yet no blood, DNA, hair, fibers, anything linking TH to that property.
Correct. And what's really bizarre, and we'll do it in the next chapter where we look at Brendan Dassey, that Ken Kratz actually said they never considered the garage as a crime scene. Isn't that incredibly interesting? Bibi.
Well, and there's also like a few pages of the dog reports that have not been able to be gotten too, isn't there?
Oh, that's correct. We don't have the full dog reports. Now, look, I'm not an expert on the dogs. There are people much, much more cluey about the dogs than myself. I know the only comment I can make, BB, is that the dogs spend more time off the salvage yard than on the salvage yard. BB.
Well, a lot of people say dogs don't lie, but dogs can be tricked. We've all taken the ball and pretended to throw it for our dog.
Correct.
The dog will go search for it and act like it's there, even though it's still in your hand. So dogs can be tricked.
That's correct. And there's just another issue as well. Remember, Blowdorn and Hilliges were on the salvage yard, right? So if they've got any scent or contamination of Teresa Horbuck on them, potentially that could lead the dogs astray as well. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, the comment from the chat, it's from actually the Londoner. He says, I would want to know if actual cadaver dogs were used and why this was not filmed by cops, which would have been standard. If cops had cadaver dogs reacting inside property, they would have filmed it.
Yes, there were. Yeah, it's a very good question. Yes, there were cadaver dogs and there were scent dogs. Now, I know that a cadaver dog hit in Stephen Avery's trailer in the bathroom area. Because remember, Stephen Avery had cut himself and bled, and there was blood on the ground. There was no hit in the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. If a violent rape, torture, mutilation, shooting, or whatever had occurred in the bedroom, the dogs would have gone crazy. There was crazy. There was no hit.
His point was, why wasn't that filmed?
Well, it could have been filmed, but we haven't seen the footage. And the other important point that the Londoner may want to know is that they prevented the dogs from crossing the yellow police tape at Cuss Road, right? Sheriff Pagel prevented the dogs that they called out to help in search and, checking the crime scenes out. They prevented the dogs from crossing the yellow line. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen somewhere and it's either in some of the videos or it's actually in the documentation, that there was at least 6 different dogs that was took to the properties, and
Yeah,
it was between the cadaver dogs and the scent dogs, and there was 6 different ones, and they did try and go to Cuss Road and things like that, but they weren't allowed, you know.
correct,
But I'm hut
correct,
on Stephen's trailer where this so-called bloody murderous event took place, you know, and if it happened, that would be the first place that they would want to go. They would have been all over that trailer and
correct, correct,
if anything happened in there.
correct, 100% correct. And you know, the tragedy of this case is that Ken Kratz is trying to give the excuse that the reason why the dogs didn't find the cremains on the 5th was because of bear. Can you believe that, guys? With all the law enforcement officers there, including Bushman, who's a dog handler, and there were dog handlers, they're trying to give the excuse that the reason why the cremains were not found was because of bear. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Steve also talked somewhere, maybe in a phone call, about that bear had a bloody nose inside the trailer before too.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Bibi. Checking convictions.
Yeah, it's more or less a comment. I honestly think they used the dogs as a reference to go back and see if there was a scent, you know, rather than to find a scent. I mean, I think they used it reverse in some ways, not allowing it to go to Cuss Road and then going to, you know, then them going
Correct.
there. And, you know what I'm saying? Like they kind of used it in
I
a
do.
reverse to make sure that there was no DNA or no cadaver smell or anything.
Yes, correct. It's, I mean, the whole idea is so crazy that you bring in the dogs and then you prevent them from crossing the line, right? I mean, what are you scared that they're going to find? It's ridiculous. That's why you get the dogs in the first place. So just to summarize, so we can go back on the chapter, yes, the dogs did do some hits in the trailer and the garage, but they didn't spend a lot of time there. Right. They spent more time off the salvage yard than on the salvage yard. So it was very, very interesting. So remember, we're talking about item FL here, which Ken Kratz said was the game changer. So guys, does anyone have any more comments about that? About the fact that Ken Kratz gave him another embedded confession? Do we have any other comments?
Looks
All
good.
right. We're all good? Fantastic. All right, guys, here's the next passage. I quote. Now, listen carefully because this one's a beauty. Finding a bullet in Avery's garage shot from his gun would hardly have been earth-shattering, but this particular bullet had passed through the body of Teresa Hallbach. She'd been murdered in that garage, shot by Avery's rifle. And the question is this: why didn't Ken Kratz say that item FL passed through Teresa Hallbach's skull? Who would like to answer that one? So notice Ken Kratz is dancing around the issue. Checking convictions.
Well, I feel he didn't want to commit to that bullet because he was very unsure what they might have found, considering there was no blood or anything visible that
Correct.
you could see. I just think he used the bullet as to, you know, show that there was a bullet, there was some shooting, but he wasn't going to commit where it went through because he wasn't sure what they would find.
Yeah, but how do you explain the fact that they had a medical examiner and also Dr. Eisenberg who said that she died because of homicidal violence?
Well, honestly, How can you explain anything that Kratz explains?
Exactly right.
It's very, very. I mean, I don't think that way, so I really can't explain that.
Exactly right. Sammy, thank you, checking conviction. Sammy.
He didn't say it because he knew it didn't happen.
I 100% agree. So what Ken Kratz did is he made up a narrative and a story, right? And unfortunately, all the defense could do is keep on saying planting, 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 planting. And that's why Buting went after Sharif Cohen in the manner that he did, and rightly so. He did a brilliant, brilliant job. We now know, of course, that Idomethil has got a lot of problems with it. A lot of problems. Anyone else want to make a comment? Jack 61.
Yeah, and that's all thanks to Sherry. I mean, this is a cowbell around her neck. Period. It's all on her.
Well, you see now, this is the problem, Jack 61. If they want to throw someone under the bus, who are they going to throw under the bus now?
Well, I mean, definitely
There's
Ken.
a lot.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot, but definitely Ken and definitely Sherry. No doubt about it.
Correct. So now Sharif Cohen is now got the spotlight on her, because if Kathleen Zellner puts her on the stand, wouldn't that be fantastic? All Kathleen Zellner has to say is, all right, how do you explain Teresa Horbach's DNA on that bullet, considering there are no bone shards on it and it never struck bone, right? So Sharif Cohen has got two answers. She's got two answers. I contaminated the bullet either deliberately or accidentally. Either way, it totally removes Idomethil as a forensic piece of evidence against Stephen Avery, which means that their case collapses then and there, because they don't have the bullet. They can't find the bullet that caused her death, which means that they can't prove that Stephen Avery had shot the Marlin Glenfield Model 60 rifle, shooting Idomethil, striking Teresa Horbach in the skull, causing the cranial bone fragments. Boom. That's how important Idomethil is. Guys, does anyone else have any comments? Jack 61?
Yeah, Sammy just put up a question from the Londoner. Where can I find this about the dog being prevented from access to Gus Road?
It's actually in the trial transcripts.
Yeah,
and it's in the trial transcripts, and it's also in the dog reports. That it actually states it in the dog reports that the dog handler, Kramer, I think it was her name, that they phoned Sheriff Pagel, and Sheriff Pagel prevented the dog from crossing the police tape. Bibi.
Yeah, is it in CASO too? Is it in?
I think
CASO?
it's in CASO as well. I think it is in CASO. So if you check things like Cuss Road, you might find it there. But I know it's in the dog reports. I believe it's also in the trial transcripts as well. Yeah, that's documented. They prevented the dog from crossing the tape, the police tape. All right. Any other comments? Right, we're all good? Okay, so it was pretty obvious that Ken Kratz now in his book said passed through the body of Teresa Horbach. Notice he didn't say skull, right? He never committed himself to saying skull, because obviously he must have known about Chris Palinek's finding. So the editor may have taken it out and just said pass through the body of Teresa Horbach. Well, the medical examiner and Eisenberg said that she died, the victim died, as a result of homicidal violence, i.e. bullet striking skull, killing her. And remember, Teresa Horbach, or the victim, if you don't believe it's Teresa Horbach, was shot execution style in the skull. one on the back of the skull, and one on the left side near the temple. That's a rather bizarre way of killing someone, which is really very unusual. All right, guys, any other comments?
Talk about overkill. I mean,
yes,
shot in the back and the side. That is very unusual.
correct. And checking convictions, you just said the right word there. What happened to Teresa Halbach is a classic example of overkill. Shot at least twice in the skull. Check your convictions. You have another comment?
You would think that there would be more bullets then, I guess, or at least a bullet in the fire pit if that's where she was burned, even being dismembered. Bullets, especially at 22, wouldn't go all the way through. That might have something to do with being shot twice, but wouldn't there be a bullet in the fire pit, or you know what I'm saying?
Well, one of the rivets and zippers survived the great big whopping fire, which means that, well, wait a minute. If they survived the big whopping fire, why isn't there some bullet fragments or lead found? And remember, because the investigators sifted the ground. They sifted the ground. They didn't mention finding any bullet fragments. And here's the other problem. Where's the rest of the skull? They only found about 35% of the skull. Where's the rest of it? Checking convictions.
Well, it's in the other piles that Ken Kratz didn't want to talk about or waste 60 seconds on.
Well, that's correct. Correct. And the other bizarre thing is 60% of the skeletal remains, no one knows where they are. Neville, do you have a comment? Neville.
The skull fragments were Teresa's. If they were Teresa's. Sorry, I gotta say it.
Yes, it is controversial, correct? You can't definitively say the remains belong to Teresa Halbach because you needed back then 15 out of 15 loci. They only were able to get 7, right? They're only able to get 7. It is highly suggestive that it's Teresa Halbach, but legally, you can't say it is definitively Teresa Halbach. 100% agree. And today, keep going, Neville.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, today, the FBI required 20 loci match. 20, not 15, 20. Neville.
Yeah. Well, anecdotal story here. The other day I was going for a walk and there was a couple approaching me, we were just passing each other, and the lady had a Halloween shirt on. It was black with a spine and ribs, like a sticker on it, like a skeleton. Yes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this whole thing, like from your neck to your pelvis, that whole trunk was missing on Teresa. I almost took a picture of her to post it in Discord. I'm like, this is huge. No ribs, right? No sternum.
They did not find any
of
rib.
that.
Yes, correct.
And according to Dr. Dehan, ribs are
They're very hard to burn.
Yes.
Yes, they're very hard to burn. Very hard to burn.
Just like a little point there. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Very good point. Checking convictions.
I'd just like to point out that they really don't. It's very misleading when they talk about Teresa's bones, because not only the 7 loci, but the finding of the amount of bones. It's very misleading. You don't realize until you dig deep, like we have, how much of the skeletal remains were missing.
Correct. The other thing, of course, is that it was very deceptive in court. They actually showed an entire skeleton and they pointed to bones that were found, which gave the impression that, almost the whole skeleton was recovered. That's not true. All the bones that were recovered were tiny fragments about the size of your thumbnail. The biggest was a couple of inches. They were all heavily fragmented, burnt, and also had evidence of cut marks, right? So no entire bones were found. So in Dr. Eisenberg's report, when she says long bones, she didn't know whether it belonged to an arm or a leg because that's how much was missing. So in her report, she says long bone, arm or leg. So it means that the skeleton was crunched. The bones were crunched to smaller fragments. So what you were saying, checking convictions, is 100% correct. This is an overkill of unbelievable proportions, right? It's not just shooting a victim and leaving the victim on the side of the road. It's the total abolition of the victim, which is just mind-blowing. Almost exactly what Sean Rudy did to Christine Rudy. Very, very frightening. Does anyone have any comments?
Yes, we have
Amy.
the Londoner asked. The Londoner asked, did Zellner ever attempt to recreate Brendan's confession sequence of events, as in putting on handcuffs, discarding hair, recreating cuts and shooting, etc.? Very good question. I don't
Yeah,
believe so.
it's a very good question, but the problem is there's actually no physical evidence against Brendan Dassey, and his timeline and story doesn't add up. And what's
Right.
incredible is that Fassbender and Uyghur even told him that his timing was completely out, right? So even Fassbender and Uyghur knew that Brendan's story was very, very troublesome. You see, Kathleen Zellner can't do any reconstruction because there's no physical evidence in the trailer or the bedroom or the garage except Ida Meffel. She can explain Ida Meffel. The key is planted. There's no question about that. Even Ken Kratz believes the key is planted. But in terms of putting Teresa Horbach in the trailer and the garage, no one can. And that's what made the investigators very frustrated. So everything that Brendan said cannot be backed up. So Brendan said, oh, yeah, we left the rifle in the RAV4. Oh, we left a knife in the RAV4. The investigators checked, they found nothing. So all the things that Brendan was telling them, he made up the whole story. Or he got the main elements of the story from the film Kiss the Girls, right? And I did a presentation on that with another researcher, and the similarities of Kiss the Girls and what Brendan told Fassbender and Uyghur, it's a 100% pattern match. Sammy.
I do believe, I really do believe, I agree with Neverly, they should do a movie about Brendan's story. And that right there, if nothing else, would set him free because it's all bogus. Every last bit of this whole thing is totally, completely bogus on him.
Well, I agree 100%. And the problem is this, guys. Even though you watch Making a Murderer 1 and 2, a lot of people say, oh, look, it's biased for against the state, etc., etc. What they should do is a film in the same manner as they did for the West Memphis 3, Devil's Knot, right? Devil's Knot is sort of like a recreation using actors, but using trial documents. And if you see the way Jesse Miskelly, who was, I think he was 16 or 17 at the time, he had the same IQ as Brendan Dassey. And he was interrogated, I think, for 12 hours. And in the end, he just told them what they wanted to hear. Exactly what Brendan said. Of course, Jesse Miskelly was trialed separately from both Damien and Jason. Exactly what happened to Stephen Avery. And they weren't meant to use any of the trial testimony of Brendan Dassey against Stephen, right? The same thing occurred with the West Memphis 3. So I agree with Neverly. They should definitely do a film. It'll be very, very powerful. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yeah, can you name the video that you did on Kiss the Girls? What's the name of
Yeah,
it?
I think it's called Brendan Dassey sees a movie, watches a movie.
Or what did he get from what? Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, or watches a movie. Yeah, it's in our it's on our YouTube channel. So if you just look up Dr. Silkman's presentations, you'll see it with Kiss the Girls. Yeah. So basically, all the major elements that he told Fassbender and Uyghur, he was recalling the video in his mind. And just to let people know, I spoke with Brendan's mother, Barb, and Barb asked Brendan, when did you see this film? Before or after you spoke to the investigators? And he said before. Isn't that interesting? Before. He then read the book when he was in prison. So he got the main elements before he spoke to the investigators. Checking convictions.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say, Dr. Silkman, would you like to tell them about what Barb said to you? That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Checking Convictions. I was floored. I was floored because I just asked, oh, Brendan, did you actually see this film? And his mother asked him, and when did you see this film, Brendan? Before I spoke to Fassbender and Uyghur. So he already had seen the film, which was being shown in Wisconsin at that time. Checking convictions.
And didn't one of the investigators or special detectives, interrogators, the a-holes, say to him, remember the movie or think of the video in your head?
That's correct. Play the
video in your head, right?
That's
Replay the
correct.
video in your head.
That's 100% correct. And that's exactly what Brendan did. It's a real pity that his defense team never checked out the film. And just to comment, because I know we're drifting a little bit, but what's interesting was that two en banc judges of the Seventh Court believed Brendan and actually summed up all the major film elements that he mentioned, right? So if two judges believed him that all the major plot elements came from Kiss the Girls, Judge Hamilton refused to acknowledge it. He didn't want to even acknowledge it. So it goes to show how dicey it is when judges have to make a decision. Some can see it and others don't. Checking convictions. Do you have a comment?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So, guys, any other comments? All right. So Ken Kratz was very crafty by not mentioning where Item FL went through. Right. In his book, he just said, I quote, passed through the body of Teresa Halbach. Well, guys, we now know that Item FL never went through skull, right? It couldn't have caused the cranial beveling, which meant that the bullet, Item FL, never went into Teresa Halbach's brain or the victim's brain, resulting in her death. So that's a major, major blow for the state. All right, guys. So I'll read the next passage, which is, it's a segue. Quote, on February 23rd, 2007, Wisconsin State Crime Lab DNA expert Cherie Culhane testified that in order to remove any residual DNA from the bullet for testing, she washed it, meaning she placed the bullet in a test tube with a solution designed to extract DNA. She then compared the DNA profile developed from the DNA on the bullet with the profile obtained from the intimate sample residing in Teresa Halbach's medical file, specifically a pap smear, maintained securely at Belen Hospital in Green Bay. It was a match. The source of the DNA on the bullet was Teresa Halbach. So here's the question. Cherie Culhane noted no blood, no stain, no tissue on item FL. So what was the possible source of the DNA on the bullet fragment item FL? Where did this DNA come from? Who would like to answer that one? Bibi.
Sherry's desk.
Correct. That's one. Cherie's desk. Yep. Now,
Probably both the DNA samples came from Sherry's
yes,
desk. When she was swabbing to get some of Teresa's DNA off her desk, she forgot her own would be there. And
correct. For those who are new to the case, Cherie Cohen contaminated the negative PCR control with her own DNA. So, Bibi's correct. Because Cherie Cohen had been working with Teresa Horbach's DNA, genomic DNA in the lab, it's highly probable that she contaminated item FL. Check 61.
I agree with BB. She contaminated it.
Yep, 100% contamination. Anyone else?
Sweat?
which I believe was deliberate.
Yes. Well, there's two options. It's either deliberate or it was due to accidental contamination. Put it this way, it doesn't look good for Cherie Cohen, no matter which way you look at it, right? Now, don't forget, Tom Fassbender rang up Cherie Cohen on the 11th of November. The 11th of November, so early on the case, and he said, try to put her in his house or garage. Isn't that interesting? Checking convictions.
Sorry,
checking.
I completely forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry.
Does anyone else have a comment about where this DNA could have come from?
Oh, I do know.
Checking convictions.
Okay, I was going to say, just to point out that they weren't, Jerry and Dean were not allowed to have an expert in the labs at the same time they were doing any of this testing because they were afraid of cross-contamination, which ended up happening anyway, conveniently, so not only did Sherry use all of the DNA in the sample, she had to do a deviation, which meant, that they weren't actually, what that means is that they're not allowed to make like it was that she's not allowed to use that if there was a contamination, correct?
Correct. So her own laboratory manual said that if you have contamination in one of your controls, and we'll talk about this in actual fact, it's a question coming up. If you have contamination in one of your controls, you throw everything out, you can't trust the result, and you redo the experiment. The problem is, Cherie Cohen used all the DNA from the bullet. And let me just tell the listeners who are new to the case, she also used all the DNA from the key. So isn't it interesting? Neither the key nor the bullet can be retested again. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yes, Dr. Silkman. Neither the key nor the bullet have anything of Teresa's on. And when they say that it's a match, imagine that. Bingo, right? Lights out. Wowza. If it didn't go through the tissue, if it didn't go through the bone, how the hell did it get there? That's the question. Just think about it. And, Cherie Cohen, first of all, somebody pointed out that, I think this was Jasnaz, that she's not a DNA specialist. She's just a lab tech, a glorified one that was grandfathered in. Exactly, right? And with all these conveniences, that she used up the whole thing for the bullet and the whole thing for, what do you say, the key, and that she contaminated. And you just look at the totality of the shenanigans that was done. And there was an explanation for everything. And they think that it's a logical explanation and it's the biggest bullshit ever. And that
unfortunately,
gun,
correct.
right?
Correct. And gun as well. Yep, gun.
Gun as well. When he said that you got to use common sense. No gun, you cannot use common sense in a DNA protocol and experiment. And
Especially if you're trying to say that this person murdered this person, and here's the reason why. Especially in a murder case, you need to be 100% accurate, and this was far from 100% accurate. It's downright disgusting, right? And I've had this
Yes.
argument with guilters many, many times, and all my comments somehow get deleted. I don't know why. I don't know. I honestly don't know why. Bibi, do you have any comments?
Who just said Strain and Beauty wasn't allowed to watch the tests be done, but
Correct.
there were students in there. She had students in there watching it.
I think that's just a cover story, to tell you the truth, right? Think about it. The bullet is the most important piece of forensic evidence in the entire case.
The
It's
game changer.
It's the
It is
game
game
changer, but it's also the mechanism of death, right? So therefore, if you're trying to pin the death of Teresa Halbach on Stephen Avery, you want to make sure that the bullet analysis is 100%. Cherie Cohen said that, I was just teaching a couple of students at the time, and I guess I was too close to the tube, and some of my spit or fingerprints got on the tube. I tell you what, in any other laboratory, that's instant dismissal, right? So Cherie Cohen had to get a deviation request form in order to submit item FL. But here's one problem. There are multiple problems. The exclusion form that she obtained was not fit for purpose. You can only use it for exclusionary purposes, not inclusionary purposes, right? And the other major problem was her own supervisor never signed it. Marie Variali was Cohen's supervisor. The form required the supervisor's signature. She actually went to another lab tech in the Milwaukee laboratory by the name of Gretchen de Groot and got her to sign it. I just can't believe this stuff. Checking convictions.
Doesn't that make that null and void then?
Null and void.
100%?
100% null and void. It's like you presenting a bank check and not signing it. Say, trust me, it's me. And you know what? When Buting said to Cohen, you realize that your supervisor hasn't signed this form. Cohen goes, it was an oversight. An oversight, the most important form. She's never had a deviation request form ever, and she gets it wrong. The judge should have tossed item FL and the deviation request form out the window. Checking convictions.
Exactly what I was just going to say. The judge should have said, this is admissible. You cannot be here.
Correct. And I just want to read this little bit because it's important. This is from the deviation request form. You've got to actually give a reason why you want a deviation request form, right? I'll read it. This is what Cohen wrote. Normally, the sample would be re-extracted, but in this case, there is no sample to re-extract. According to our current protocol, this sample would only be used for exclusionary purposes. However, in this case, the presence of my DNA in the manipulation control does not interfere with the interpretation of the profile from sample FL. Therefore, I propose a deviation from the protocol allowing me to use sample FL for inclusionary purposes. I don't know whether she was on drugs or intoxicated. She just made all that up herself. It's the biggest lot of crap I've ever read. Checking convictions.
Too many fumes from the Aquanet.
Yeah, or maybe she's smelling the chloroform in the laboratory. I have no idea. It's sort of saying, I can't really use it because of this, this, and this. However, I want to use it anyway. And the judge allowed it because the judge didn't understand it. So it is really, really horrific what Culhane got away with. Sammy.
Okay, I've been really composed for a really, 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 really long time.
Oh,
And
no.
I just gotta
Oh, no.
say it, these
Let
mother
her rip.
effers are off of their effing rockers,
Correct.
letting all this crap slide.
Correct. Correct. Now, thank you, Sammy. The important thing is this. Cherie Culhane actually has a laboratory manual that says exactly what you must do under certain circumstances. If you contaminate a control, end of story. End of story. You repeat the experiment again. But lo and behold, Culhane used up all the DNA from item FL. Checking convictions.
Yeah, can I ask you, has this happened since or ever before the deviation with Sherry?
No.
Okay.
It's only occurred once. But here's the scary thing. In her laboratory, she has the highest rate of contamination. Furthermore, they keep a contamination record. And what's scary is this. They have amplified DNA from people that weren't even involved in the case. No one knows where the DNA came from. And this is in her contamination report. So to try and say, oh, no, there's no way we clean the lab, bullshit. You can definitely get DNA contamination from the air itself. Alice, do you have a comment?
Firstly, they're all a bunch of tossers. And secondly, now this is just my opinion, that I think when it comes to the DNA side of things, they deliberately fucked it up so that if it did come to appeals or anything like that, there was nothing left to be able to be tested. Because Stephen got off with DNA, proven DNA, the last time. That's why he got exonerated in 2003. So this time, they were making sure that even if it did come to an appeal or anything like that, that there wasn't going to be any DNA. And I think when they realised that Kathleen was wanting to do all this testing with the new DNA stuff that you can do now, there was a good chance that she was going to find out that these bones maybe did not belong to Teresa. And I think that's why they handed them over to the family when they did. And I mean, this is just my opinion, but it's a strong opinion that I've got, that I think they've done this with the DNA deliberately.
Correct. Well said, Alice. Well said. 100% correct. Think about it, guys. Look at all the DNA evidence in this case. You've got the hood latch DNA that makes no sense. Huge amounts of DNA on the hood latch swab. You've got the key, right? Huge amounts of DNA on the key, and only Stephen Avery's DNA, not the owner, Teresa Hallbach's, and there's no DNA left. So you can't test it again. You look at item FL, right? Item FL, she used up all the DNA. It cannot be retested again. So all the DNA results against Stephen Avery in this case make no sense at all, right? And this only came about because Kathleen Zellner hired DNA experts to look at all the evidence. And even they found that there were shenanigans going on. It didn't make any sense at all. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Mr. Jinx says, well, it's not like we've never seen a lab tech on drugs. Look at that lab in Massachusetts.
Correct. Yeah, there were those two technicians that were arrested because they were either faking results or they were on drugs. Jack 61, do you remember the title of that documentary with those two? I forgot. those
How
two
to
guys.
fix a
How
drug.
how to fix a drug scandal.
That's correct. That's correct. So these were two laboratory techs. One was faking the results, dry labbing, it's called, faking the results, and the other one was high as a kite on drugs, all day, every day. So you couldn't have any reliability on any of the results. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Jinx also says, and the lab audit showed that there was a lab tech that was drunk while at work on the
Correct.
Steve Avery case.
100% correct. And it's likely to be Colhane.
Yes.
Because
I
she's
think
the
so.
one that worked on the Stephen Avery case. And she,
Yeah.
I think, was given
And
a
she
couple of days off.
volunteered herself.
She volunteered.
Yeah.
Correct. She volunteered herself. And if you notice, guys, Marie Variali, her supervisor, didn't go into court to present the results. Cherie Colhane did herself. Remarkable.
And
Yes,
Cherie was also one of the lesser qualified people in that lab because she had been grandfathered in and hadn't even had all the education that the ones that were hired on.
Correct. She doesn't have a PhD. She's got just an ordinary science degree. But because she was there from the start, as you said, she got grandfathered in. Because today, there's no way you'll be able to get a job like that with a science degree. No way. Checking convictions.
Am I mistaken in saying that they kind of made Teresa disappear biologically? There's really nothing there anymore?
Well, put it this way. Her bones are gone. The cremains are gone. You can't test that again. The key DNA is gone. Even though it had Stephen Avery's DNA on it, you can't retest the key, right? And also the bullet, you can't test idomethil again. So that's gone. So biologically, the only place they found Teresa Horbach's DNA. Now, think about it. The only place they found Teresa Horbach's DNA was on item FL. There was no DNA of Teresa in the trailer and in the garage. The only place it was found was on the bullet fragment. And idomethil makes no sense whatsoever. Checking convictions.
Well, am I mistaken? Was there any was it fingerprints or DNA on the handle of her RAV?
A
Yes.
fingerprint on the inside door, inside handle part.
Correct. There was touch DNA inside. See, if we're talking about the RAV, and I'll summarize the RAV, you've got her blood in the RAV, her saliva in the cherry Pepsi can, and touch DNA on the driver's side door handle on the inside. They found touch DNA, right? But in terms of out of the RAV4, the only place they found her DNA was on idomethil, nowhere else. Bibi.
And everybody believes half the crap in the RAV is not true anyway, and that the RAV was planted there. So
Correct.
The whole thing, there's nothing to think that the whole thing of the RAV being there couldn't have been dummied up.
Correct. That is indeed a possibility. Correct. Right, guys. Are there any other comments about that? All right. Let's continue. And this is another segue of what we've been discussing. I quote, in his closing argument, Jerry Buting tried to convince the jury that the DNA evidence was contaminated and asked them to ignore it. Cherie Colhane had inadvertently introduced her own DNA into the control sample during the DNA testing process. This type of error has no impact on the results of the test itself, but lab protocol would normally require the analyst redo the test in its entirety. Unfortunately, because the DNA recovered on the bullet was in such a small quantity, the lab did not have the luxury of rewashing the bullet and starting over. The defense was given the option of retesting the bullet themselves, but chose not to. They preferred to simply complain about lab protocol. Oh, God. And here's the question. Why was Ken Kratz trying to be as stupid and naive as Norm Garn? Who'd like to answer that one?
He is a bully,
Neverly.
and attack is the best defense. He's ridiculing, putting down the defense team, you know what I mean? And what he says makes, again, no sense. So you can't really reason with an unreasonable person. Why would he say that?
Yes, but do you see the insanity of it? He's
Of
done
course.
another embedded confession. He actually just said, yeah, Culhane needed to do the whole test again. However, because of A, B, C, D, it's fine. So
Yeah.
he's saying that the defense should have retested the bullet, but there was nothing to retest. Neverly.
I'm sorry, that was my thing. Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah. Okay. Sammy, do you have a comment?
I honestly think he was being petty because he knew if he, especially in that courtroom, was serious and took him seriously and listened to him, the serious matter would come up of this should not have been admissible.
Yes,
He
100%
could not have
correct.
that happen.
100% correct. He feared that if itemFL was not admissible, they had nothing against Steve. They just had circumstantial evidence. They can't tie Steve to the rifle, to itemFL, to the cranial bone fragment, to the death of Teresa Halbach. That's why Norm Garn said, look, people have to be reasonable and allow an exemption, people understand. So Norm Garn just broke a scientific principle that was in Culhane's book that said, if you contaminate a control, you redo the experiment again. Because she used up all the DNA, tough luck. Tough luck, bad science. She tried to cover up for bad science by trying to get the deviation request form slip through. She probably didn't even tell her supervisor about it. Checking conviction.
Tough luck? This is somebody's life they are trialing. You know what I'm saying? They are putting
Correct.
somebody's, not one, but two. So tough luck? Wow.
Correct.
What an arrogant statement. I was going to say only in Wisconsin, but as we know, this stuff happens everywhere.
Correct. So Ken Kratz was trying to justify Culhane contaminating the control, right? As if to say, don't worry about it, it's not an issue at all. Checking convictions.
Yeah, cover up your bullshit. Okay, that's all that I can see is cover up your bullshit.
Correct. And so, does anyone have any other comments about that? We're all good? Because the next question, again, leads perfectly to what we have been discussing. And I've had this argument with plenty of guilters who simply do not get it. I'll quote, and this is what Ken Kratz wrote in his book. It's critical to understand that no contamination occurred on the bullet itself or the sample taken from the bullet, just the control sample, a solution without any DNA that is used as a comparison. Making a murderer gave plenty of time to Buting's accusations of contamination, but ignored the part of Culhane's testimony in which she explained why the control sample results had nothing to do with whether Teresa Halbach was the source of the DNA on the bullet. Now, here's the question. Why are experimental controls so important in forensic science. Why bother doing controls? Who can answer that one? Jack 61.
Because you have to be able to measure yourself and make sure that something foreign hasn't entered into your experiment, basically. I mean, that's the way I see it.
Yep, correct. So basically it's used as a checking mechanism. Correct?
Yep.
Correct? Yep, beautiful. Anyone else would like to have a go? Why have experimental controls in forensic science? Checking convictions.
I was just going to say, so I thought you were talking about blind testing.
Yeah. That's a different
Right.
thing altogether, and that wasn't done. Blind testing wasn't done. But why have an experimental control? Sammy.
Something to reference it on?
Yep, as a form of comparison. Yep. Sammy, do you have that comment?
Wouldn't it help you to pick out anomalies before and after? Then you can really refine your results.
Correct. Very, very good. BB.
Yeah, she would have been able to go back to it and buff it or whatever, and then retest part of it and still say part of it again. If she'd have done it right the first time, right?
Correct. Thank you, BB. Anybody else? All right. So I'm going to spend just 1 minute. Right now, my background is molecular biology, and I've worked in the laboratory, and I've got a lot of research papers, and I've worked in a lab. I've done PCRs, and I've done controls. So when you do an experiment, the most important part of the experiment is not the test result. The most important part of the experiment are the controls. The controls determine that all your protocols are working perfectly, that your experiment is working perfectly. So if your controls work, then your test result, what you're testing, you can make a claim, right? Whether it's positive or negative. If your controls, if there's something wrong with your controls, you cannot make one statement about your test results, because it means that something is wrong with your protocol, either the components or the machine. There's something wrong in your components. Because Cherie Cohen discovered her own DNA in the negative control, it means that a contamination event took place. So therefore, and this is interesting, guys, because one of the journalists actually said this to Gahn. And the journalist said, well, if she accidentally introduced her own DNA in the control, couldn't she have accidentally introduced Teresa Horbach's DNA in the test sample, in the bullet sample? And I thought, brilliant. And Norm Gahn tried to basically minimize it and trivialize it. But that's the reason why you have controls to protect yourself and experimental integrity. If any guilter says to you that you can bypass the negative controls in a PCR experiment, send them to me. I'll gladly talk to them. Jack 61.
I think Buting was also really trying to illustrate the lack of integrity in the lab, because that control sample was contaminated. So, that just goes to show that they really weren't in control. Cherie was not in control of her own work area.
That's correct. And Buting actually elegantly showed, you've had contaminations events before, haven't you, Ms. Cohen? Yes. And she had the highest contamination record of all the DNA analysts. So therefore, it proved that despite her cleaning protocols, cleaning her bench, cleaning the equipment, they still got contamination events, right? So therefore, if you have a contamination in a control, you throw everything out, solutions, everything, you restart again. Because she used up all the DNA, she could not do the experiment again. A disaster for the state. All right, guys, are there any other comments? Sammy?
Yeah, shouldn't have said anything about solutions. All I could picture was her using it for mouthwash and putting it back in the bottle.
Correct. So, guys, let me tell you this. If someone had presented this result, as in the item FL result, with a contaminated control at a conference or in a laboratory meeting, you'll be laughed at and thrown out of the room. Yet, in a major court case involving a murder, this result was allowed to be presented in a court of law. How can that possibly be? And the answer is because the judge and the jury were not scientists or molecular biologists, right? Had there been a molecular biologist on that panel, it would have been curtains for Cherie Cohen. Curtains, because the molecular biologist would have argued strongly why you can't present item FL. But here's the kicker, guys. Item FL now is part of evidence, and the state cannot retract it, which means that Kathleen Zellner is going to have a field day with item FL, and the state will not be able to answer it at all. Does anyone have any comments, guys?
All good.
All good? Beautiful. Well, believe it or not, we got 2 more questions and we're done. So we're doing really, really well. Now, believe it or not, that's all the stuff on the bullet in Ken Kratz's chapter. That's it. There's nothing else in this particular chapter. There's nothing else. So he basically stopped all the controversy, everything, right? He just said that Teresa Horbach's DNA was found on item FL, and we don't have to worry about it. Now, this is really curious, guys. This is what Ken Kratz wrote under the same chapter called The Bullet, right? This blew me away. Now, let's go for it. There's 2 more questions to go. And I quote, while cops finished up in the garage, Fassbender and Uyghur searched the trailer where Barb Yander and Brendan Dassey lived. They found a pair of pink fur-lined handcuffs and leg irons purchased by Buck on October 9th, 2005, while shopping with her brother Stephen. Stephen had bought a pair of new silver handcuffs and leg irons himself that day, and a set that would be recovered from his trailer in the November search. There's nothing illegal about silver handcuffs, of course, and Teresa's DNA wasn't found on them, though it might seem a bit odd to be buying metal shackles when your girlfriend is in jail and expected to remain there for another 6 months. Jody Stokowski herself expressed surprise when learning Avery had purchased the items on October 9th. In a recorded jail cell call, she asked Avery who they were meant to be used with. I quote, "They were a surprise for my new wife," Stephen insisted, trying to convince his imprisoned fiancée that he was thinking ahead almost 6 months to celebrating her release date. Now remember, this is under the chapter called The Bullet. Here's the question. What was Ken Kratz, in brackets, who admitted being treated for sex addiction, trying to imply about Stephen Avery purchasing a novelty sex toy. Who would like to answer that one? Sammy.
He's jealous.
He's jealous. He's jealous. He's jealous. That's a
Oh
possibility.
yeah, he's gonna be missing out on something.
All right, he's jealous. Checking convictions.
Well, I think Kratz is trying to just say that he always had some kind of pre-planned,
Yes.
deviant behavior, that he had this dungeon and all this kind of thing, going on. So why not, why not just add to his collection of torture items?
Yep, correct. Very good. BB.
Oh my God. The
Where do we
handcuffs
start, right?
from a sex shop. Oh my God, my head's exploding over here. Okay, first of all, you can reach up with your hand and flip the little lever and become freed from them. Okay?
And BB, we're not going to
I've
ask
been
how
told.
you know that.
No,
We're
I've
not
been
going to ask
told.
how you know that,
I've been
BB.
told by people. But yes, it is doable. And free yourself
Yes.
from them. And why did they test them for Mom Avery's DNA?
Yes.
Okay, those
That's
are
true.
my two main points.
That's
They
true.
also took in, the little toy, every teenager has them on their keychain here in America, the little thumb cuffs.
Yes.
That also you can reach and flip the little lever on and free yourself from them.
Correct. But what do you think? What do you think Ken Kratz now? Be Ken Kratz. Why did he talk about those cuffs? Which, and even he said, were A, legal, and B, didn't have Teresa Hallbach's DNA on it. Why do you think he mentioned them, BB?
Because he's trying to set up this pre-planned thing. That Steve
100%
had this
correct.
plan because he felt people owed him because of the rape conviction.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Very good point. So, in other words, he's saying that Stephen bought these items to be used on Teresa Hallbach sometime in the future.
Or whoever he was able to get hold of.
Correct.
Or like his dungeon material.
Correct. But why did he write that in the book entitled The Bullet?
Another embedded confession.
Another embedded confession. Very good. Thank you, BB. Jack 61.
Well, in addition to planning for the future, I think he's also, he's kind of saying that, Joni's going to be locked up, so whoever comes along, or maybe even Steven's got somebody, at that point in time, already had somebody there that he was fooling with because Jody was locked up, and the handcuffs were for that person.
Yes. Very good. Just Rhonda. Thank you, Jack 61. Just Rhonda.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. So it's perfectly reasonable for him to buy those handcuffs to plan for a future event of restraining and assaulting and murdering Teresa Hallbach, but it's not logical to think that he could buy them for use with his future wife. That's a contradiction.
Correct. 100% correct. But even Ken Kratz said that they couldn't link those cuffs to Teresa Hallbach. Her DNA wasn't on there, right? Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, to your question, I'll be serious now, okay? He had to Stephen appear, no matter what, even after all of this, to be violent, sexual deviant.
That's correct. So, in other words, he was creating a persona of Stephen Avery, right?
Yep.
100% correct. Neverly, do you have a comment?
What you guys said, all of the above, that's exactly it. Due to the irrelevance of the handcuff in the whole case, this is just a continuation of vilifying Stephen, creating that persona, vilifying Stephen on and on and on. It's so petty. He didn't have to mention that at all. Maybe he wanted to fill out some pages, but I believe that it's a vilification that he continues to do on and on, because we know that Kratz absolutely hates Stephen.
Correct.
And what happened in 85 and how he became so popular and how this whole trial actually backfired on Kratz because everybody saw that he was such a douche, to be polite.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and he didn't get all the glory and drama that he wanted with this. He just
Correct.
got total slap in the face. So yeah, I think that it's continuation of the vilification of Stephen, and that remember, you guys, I'm gonna say something, so correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we read somewhere in a document that Kratz said that he himself has a kind of special room in his basement that he only owns the key to it and nobody else is allowed to go there?
I think
I
you're
Can
right.
somebody back me up on
Yes.
that one?
Yeah,
Yes.
I
There
believe
we
it.
go.
Correct.
There we go. So another projection, just like the press conference, how he eloquently, fluidly said those words on and on and on. How long was the press conference? You know, starting with if you're 15 or younger, leave the room because there's going to be some
Correct.
graphic explanation of what happened. You know what I mean? Where did he come up with that? Brandon didn't say it the way Kratz said it.
Correct.
He
100%
didn't.
correct. I think it's
Yeah.
just part. I think it's just part of the character assassination of Stephen Avery
Yes,
at every
absolutely.
possible. But what I can't understand is why would you want to write that in your book when you've got no proof, just speculation, which is interesting, right? Because he's claiming that Making a Murderer was biased, and yet what's Ken Kratz doing in his book? Making
Throwing
wild,
shit and
speculative.
hoping something's
Exactly
gonna
correct.
stick.
100% correct. Thank you, Neverly. Checking convictions.
Yes, Ronald Cass says Kratz wanted to create an illusion of a sex slave captivity,
100%
whatever.
agree.
Yeah.
Yep, 100% agree. And if you have a look at the presentation I did about Kiss the Girls with another researcher, Bron, many years ago, you'll see that there's a scene in Kiss the Girls in which a white female is cuffed to a bed with her arms and her legs. Exactly what Brendan Dassey said to the investigators. So what he was describing was what he saw in the film of a female being handcuffed or restrained in a bed by her arms and her legs. And here's the problem, right? They found one set of cuffs and one set of leg irons. Well, if you're going to restrain somebody, you need two sets. That might explain why they went to Barb's house and confiscated the ones in her bedroom. Isn't that interesting? But when they tested the cuffs and the leg irons, they didn't have the DNA belonging to Teresa Horbach. And checking convictions is correct. They excluded the DNA from Mama Avery. They actually said that in a DNA report. Can you believe that? They said that, we didn't find Dolores Avery's DNA on the cuffs, which is a shocking thing when you think about it.
Oh,
All right,
sick.
guys. Yeah, and sick. Correct. Guys, do we have any other comments?
No, looks
We're all
good.
good? We're all good? Okay. All right, guys. Well, our final question for the night, and I quote again, this is under the chapter, The Bullet. Now, listen carefully. The morning of October 10th, the day after he purchased the handcuffs and leg irons, Stephen Avery summoned Teresa to the salvage property for a hustle shot, simply meaning the photo shoot request came directly to the photographer from the customer, not through Auto Trader magazine. October 10th is the date Avery greeted Teresa wearing only a white towel. Dean Strang theorized that perhaps Avery had come from a swim in his backyard pool that day. Seeing nothing untoward about it, the National Weather Service records indicates 46 degrees as the high temperature on October 10th, 2005 in Michigan. Hardly swimming weather, even for Wisconsinites. The 10th of October is also the date Avery took digital photos of his erect penis, found date stamped and printed on his desk during the search of his trailer. A quote, "It seems Teresa's last visit to the Avery property had a major impact on Stephen," said Tom dryly. He's talking about Tom Fassbender. Now, here's the question. Is anyone remotely surprised that Ken Kratz was a self-confessed sex addict? And why was there a need to write about this in a chapter entitled The Bullet? Who's going to answer that one? Who would like to answer that one?
Only thing I can say is that Kratz is so involved with anything sex testing, sex this, sex that. He just can't get enough of that and sweat.
Correct. Anything else? Anyone else? All right. Now, Jack 61.
I don't even know where you start with him saying that, especially in this chapter. And as far
On the
as
bullet.
Yeah, you're right. But Stephen coming to the door in a towel. I mean, maybe he just got out of the shower, or maybe
Correct.
It could be any number of things that he just didn't want to, expose himself. He was trying to cover up.
Yes. He didn't flash her. He didn't do anything inappropriate. He didn't do anything inappropriate. Now, look, let's ask a bit of a funny question. Have you ever gotten out of the shower in a robe because someone knocked on the door or pressed the doorbell and you were expecting a delivery? Has anyone ever gone to the front door dressed in a robe coming out of the shower?
Absolutely.
Anyone?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Better than naked.
Yes.
But it is a decent thing.
So if anyone in society can do it, why can't Stephen Avery, dressed in a white robe, go and answer the door? What's so particular about him being in a white towel answering the door?
There isn't. It's just that
checking convictions.
I'm sorry. There's nothing unusual about it. It's Pratt's making it, something deviant and disgusting, and it's him. I mean, because it's really, he could have been taking a shower, come around, thinking it's just somebody in the family. I'm sorry. I don't think Teresa was creeped out about that either. Maybe she found it a little unusual, maybe a little embarrassing, because I have knocked on people's door and caught them in the robe or whatever. So I think it's just the way Pratt makes it a bad thing. He had to put this, he's a psychopath, he's a predator. He had to put that in their minds.
Well, on one of the clips that I posted up on YouTube, he actually did call Stephen Avery a psychopath. And the presenter said, "How do you know he's a psychopath?" Because I just said that. In other words, it's his personal opinion. Ken Kratz is not a psychologist, but he said that Stephen Avery is a psychopath. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, and you said the picture he took of himself was time-stamped. How do we know he hadn't just finished up the photo shoot when she came to the door and he's in the towel? And maybe that all happened before she even came.
Correct. But what about Tom Fassbender saying, and I quote, "It seems Teresa's last visit to the Avery property had a major impact on Stephen." How the hell?
Like I said, it could all happen before she came that time.
Exactly correct. So again, It's a character assassination of
Yes.
Stephen Avery. So he observed a personal photograph of Stephen Avery, his genitals, and he was trying to relate it to Teresa Halbach's visit, despite Stephen Avery having a fiance. So again, it honestly makes no sense whatsoever. BB. All good?
Yeah.
It actually does make sense when you think about this. This book is coming from someone with a sex addiction.
Correct.
And trust me,
Self-confessed.
I've known these people. Every single solitary thing that they see, say, and hear translates to sex in their head to the point where you just want to slap the fudge right out of them. Because
Right.
it seems like every single thought is about sex somehow, some way.
Yes.
So this book is coming from that kind of individual. So
No
that doesn't
surprises.
help.
No surprises at all. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Fortunately, this is not the isolated case where the special investigators and prosecutors jump into conclusions left and right.
Correct.
We've seen in many other cases that we watch, documentaries and movies, that that's what they do. They try really hard to connect the dots. And as I always
Correct.
said, there's a Grand Canyon, gap between those dots. But,
Correct.
somebody like Ken Kratz, which is very sad, he's obviously intelligent. And God gave him that gift of gab. And what he's done with that, nothing glorious.
No, correct.
Nothing glorious.
But again, it is a character assassination of Stephen Avery.
Oh, absolutely.
And to write those things in a chapter, he put them at the end of the chapter entitled The Bullet, which makes no sense whatsoever. Yet, he did it. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to remember, Doc. I mean, Teresa had been a Stephen's property at least 10 to 15 times before this so-called incident, that all of a sudden he just decided that he's going to become a deviant towards Teresa. There was nothing to implicate any of that. And I mean, the way that they try and portray him to be a sex deviant and he's done nothing but plan this all the time that he was in jail, that he spent 18 years planning that when he was going to get out of the jail, even though he was fighting for his innocence during all this period, the 18 years that he was in jail, according to Kratz and all the rest of them, is that no, he was being a deviant and he was thinking about going to murder somebody as soon as he got out the jail, which is the one thing that would land him in the place that he didn't want to be in the first place, which makes it even more ridiculous.
Alice, can you believe he wrote in his book that Stephen Avery was planning the murder of a victim the day he went into jail?
I know.
So he's been thinking for 18 years that when I get out, I'm going to kill someone. He wrote that in his book.
That is just so fucking ludicrous, and I think when Stephen gets out, he needs to sue the ass off of Kratz for defamation of character because of what he's saying, and he's went all the way back to 85 by saying, as you said, that for the day Stephen went in, he was planning on doing this when he got out. I don't friggin' think so. The man was thinking about when he wants to be released and his innocence and fighting for his innocence. Know that he was going to murder somebody when he come out.
Correct. 100% correct. And we know that's true because look how much Stephen has been fighting for his innocence and pleading his innocence. And he's now have to do it all over again. Right? But you see, Ken Kratz was at liberty to make up a bullshit story about Stephen and even had to character assassinate him in his book, right? So if you don't understand the context of what Ken is writing, you've got no idea, right? It makes out that Stephen is the most evil sex predator on the planet. And yet, what was Kratz booted out for? For being a sexual predator himself.
Exactly,
And a
Doc. It's like
narcissist.
pot kettle black, you know? It really
Correct.
is like pot kettle black, you know?
100%
What if
correct.
his fantasies, you know? But because he couldn't actually do them, he's making out that Stephen was this deviant and was thinking about this for years. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So he was ridiculing that man before anything, you know what I mean, by saying that. It's disgusting.
Yeah, 100% correct. 100% correct. Checking convictions.
Yeah, a comment from Angie Dickinson. Ken Kratz makes out his next 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, God. Oh, I don't
More
know.
like
Look,
50 Shades of Fat. Yeah.
need to get another bucket. I think.
We had a comment that
Yeah.
followed that. It says, KK's little peepee is unable to shadow any shade of gray.
Oh my! The Juriz, he's on fire. He's on fire. Jack 61. Jack 61.
We're not saying that, you know, he was looking at those photos that Steve took of himself and got kind of jealous. Is that where we're going here? I'm just saying. I don't want to take this anywhere bad.
I think he got excited.
Well, you know, the thing is, this is what really pissed off the investigators, right? And I believe Mark Wiegert even mentioned in an early report, correct me if I'm wrong, remember when they took Stephen Avery's computer and they were expecting to find pornography, violence towards women, etc., and they found nothing. They found all of that pornographic material on Bobby Dassey's computer, which completely screwed them over. Correct, Jack 61?
That's right. Wiegert had told the newspaper reporter that they
Yep.
expected to find everything you just named off there.
Yep, correct. Except they found it on the wrong computer. Neverly, do you have a comment?
And kept that CD for 12 years hidden in, was it Fassbender's?
A Fassbender, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
12 years. Imagine,
Yep.
and here we are talking about, the white towel. He covered himself with the white towel. He bought pink or whatever, silver handcuffs at a sex toy shop. Yet we have all that vile, sick porn on
That's correct.
bodies.
Correct.
And we hide it. Yeah.
Yep, which they completely ignored. 100%
And
correct.
hid it. That's a purposeful
Correct.
action. Yeah.
100% correct. Well, look, guys, I am a little bit conscious of the time, and we've actually finished chapter 8. See, Bibi, I promised. We finished chapter 8. I couldn't believe it, but we've done it.
No way.
We did. We did.
Wow.
It's not
how
as
many
good.
parts did it take us to do this one chapter? Like 3?
Couple of podcasts
Yeah.
for sure. But that's not as bad as one coffee podcast where I had 20 slides and we only did one.
One slide.
One slide.
And it was
One
like
slide.
2.5 hours.
Correct, on one slide. No, it wasn't too bad.
It's also interesting that we're on the chapter of the key. We ended up talking about the freaking towel.
Yeah. Correct. So, you know, the reality is Stephen Avery didn't break any laws. Teresa Hobart never made a formal complaint about seeing Stephen Avery in a towel. Stephen Avery was in his own house. And all of us have been caught out at one stage or another, whereby, you know, you come out of the shower, you're wrapped in a towel, and someone knocks on your door. And you go, oh, is this a delivery or what? We've all been caught in that situation, but we don't mean anything nasty. Yes, he took photograph of his own genitals, but that's meant to be for private consumption, right? I mean, Lord knows what type of photographs Ken Kratz has got, and I don't want to know, right? Yet, Ken Kratz made it public. He made it public, right? And there were also photographs of his fiance's genitals as well. And apparently And that got Colburn so upset that he had to shake the cabinet. BB.
What Steve had on his computer, like this you said earlier, is nothing in comparison to what was on the Dassey computer.
Correct.
Not a word said about that.
Correct. On the Dassey computer was torture porn. Torture porn. It wasn't standard erotic material. It was mutilation, cutting, death, dismemberment, shooting. Oh, wow. You know, what happened to Teresa Horbach? You could almost pattern match what was found on that computer. Check 61.
You know, another thing that seems to get lost in the shuffle here is that, you know, Teresa didn't have to go back to the Averys if she was afraid. And that, you know, he's built up all this, you know, dragging Steve through the mud, make all this stuff salacious and everything. He's a monster and all this horse shit. But the truth is, she had a choice. And she could have just said,
Yes.
hey, I'm not going to the Averys. There's some weird shit went on there that I didn't like it, and I'm not going back. Send somebody else.
Yes.
And we already know. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Neverly. Go for it.
And we already know that she was strong enough of a person to say no when she felt uncomfortable and in danger, because she already said no to a Buku Buck's wedding shoot when she figured out that Ryan was going to be there. She gave that job away. So why wouldn't she do that for $18 or $8, whatever it was? Yeah.
Correct.
If she was that uncomfortable with going to the Averys.
Correct. Well, unfortunately, Ken Kratz had to build this scenario that Stephen Avery lured Teresa Horbach to the salvage yard, which is complete garbage. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, I honestly believe that it was his way of, and I'm talking about Stephen Avery, being romantic and preparing for when Jody did come home, because for all we know, he was going to make a card out of that pic for her and give it to her with the handcuffs. Who knows? But I'm just saying, he had no idea that anybody was going to be all up in his business.
Correct. But, you know, to me, that's personal, private matters between Stephen and Jody. And none of us should pass judgment or comment on personal matters. You know? But Ken Kratz, that's correct. But Ken Kratz had to make it nefarious and to convert and to make Stephen look like a sexual predator. That was his aim. BB.
And in a lot of the jailhouse phone calls, Jody is telling Steve that you can't just say, will you marry me? You have to be romantic about it.
That's correct.
You need to be more romantic. You need to run me a bath with some candles and some
rose petals.
And
rose petals.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, she's constantly on him.
Correct.
That he doesn't have this romantic side, and that he needs to think more romantically. So maybe that was his way of working on some romantic plans for when she gets home.
Correct. But you have to admit, BB, that's between them two, right?
Setting the bedroom up the way she had wanted it set up.
That's correct. 100% correct, BB. 100% correct. It's Ken Kratz that made it horrible, nasty, nefarious.
Yes.
You know, that was his intentions all along. Jack 61. Thank you, BB. Jack 61.
Damn, I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry, Doc.
That's right. No worries. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
I was looking at a story that's so out there, and blown out of proportions, or just unbelievable, amazing. Say what? Consider the source. In this case, it's Ken Kratz. That's our source. So, warning.
Yes, but we can say that in hindsight, during the trial, we didn't know about all his nefarious activities. So it was very powerful evidence. Well, he tried to make it very powerful evidence against Stephen during the trial. Jack 61.
I recall what I was going to say. if anybody wants to read about some really kind of out there stuff about Mr. Kratz, they need to go over to Convoluted Brian and read through some of the paperwork that he got. Oh my.
Yes, I could imagine. I could imagine. It would not be good at all.
No.
All right, guys.
We couldn't
Yes.
read it. We couldn't read it on here.
Yes, you couldn't.
Knock your socks off.
Oh my God. Okay, we need a link.
I'll be
All
sick
right.
that day.
Hi. Hey, Susan, how are you? Has Susan joined us?
I think she's getting an IV of coffee inserted right now.
No problems at all. Well, look, guys, we actually have finished chapter 8, and I'm just conscious of the time. So why don't we run down the panel? Let us know how you've been coming along and whether you've got anything to that you would like to add in the discussion. Alice.
Thanks, Doc. Nothing new really to report. I would just like to say it's lovely to see Rhonda back on the panel with us
Yes.
this week. It's absolutely fabulous to have her back.
And also, what a magnificent job on the open mic
yes,
for the Daniel
yes,
Otzel case. Thank you very much. That was brilliant.
yes. That was good. And that's about it. Hopefully we'll have more coming, and looking forward to open mic if there's an open mic this week.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alice. Bibi.
Just getting really excited about the rally. Did some serious packing the last couple of days.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Bibi. Checking convictions.
Yeah, welcome back, Rhonda. Good to see you. And yeah, just getting ready for rally and getting all my crafts done. Can't wait. Trying to hook up people to take cameras and be ready for catching some good things for the lives at the rally. Me and Becca are going to be doing a special live from Pete Dassey's basement.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. And we're just, the usual weekend thing. We'll have our live with the post-conviction Brendan tomorrow. And I think there's a part 2 of open mic, but I'm not sure. I'll let somebody else, validate that.
Incredible. Yep. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Checking Convictions. Looking forward to that rally. Jack 61.
Yep, we will be having a part 2 of Daniel's case tomorrow. I mean, there's so many areas. I'm really going to leave it up to Rhonda and Cherie and Alice of what they want to present. It doesn't matter because there's so many really crummy areas of the case. All of them are bad, and they're all worth talking about and exploring. Number 2, been showing, during this kind of lull time with the case, to kind of get my head, I don't know how everybody else feels, but kind of get my head kind of withdrawn from the case a little bit. I take these kind of little, siestas away. I've been doing a lot of streaming, and one really good one that we talked about a few minutes ago, well, before we started, that I mentioned to you, called Outcry. It's a 5-part, it's a 5-part docu-series. It's not, it's the real thing. It's not like, it's not actors. It's, it's the actual people being interviewed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's about a football star, this kid. He's 17 years old, and he's or 16, maybe 17, I don't know. Anyway, he's a football star in Texas, and he ultimately gets charged with maybe one of the others can remember the exact terminology, but he gets charged with super conduct.
Aggravated.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Super aggravated sexual conduct against 2 4-year-olds, boys.
Oh.
Yeah, and it goes down this path of showing it's really good. It explores what a terrible investigation through the prosecution, and the trial. But the good thing about it is that he got a defense lawyer eventually that really turned everything around, and found out so much stuff. Anyway, it's definitely worth a watch. It's called Outcry. It's on Showtime. And then one more I want to mention that Alice brought to us is called In the Name of the Father. I'd never seen it before. It's about events that happened in 1973 in Scotland with the bombings and the IRA, and it's a true story of wrongful conviction and how that turned out. Now, it is acted, but it's based on true events.
Yes.
Oh my God!
Is that I forgot the name of the actor, and is it Daniel
Daniel
Day-Lewis?
Day-Lewis. Yes.
It is.
Daniel Day-Lewis. Yeah,
Yes.
I remember watching a brutal film. Brutal.
It is. I'd never seen it before. It absolutely blew my socks off. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, thank everybody for coming today and being a part of being part of our little world and staying after these wrongful conviction and being an advocate, and looking forward to the opening up mic tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jack61. Just Rhonda.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. Just getting back to getting busy again, and
yes,
which is obviously helpful. And yes, we'll be doing a part 2 tomorrow, and I'm just going to be honest. I mean, I'll have it all put together before we go live tomorrow, or just in the nick of time, as Jack well knows. But because it's just so hard. I mean, Jack said, it is almost impossible to decide how to present something. And so, but we will have it put together so that it's informative and educational, and will get you pissed off. So,
yes.
Yeah, but getting ready for rally. Super excited for that. And
fantastic.
I can't go live from my channel. I don't have enough subscribers yet, so hint hint. But but I do have a GoPro, or however I can help with that. If that's helpful or not, I'll be bringing my GoPro too. So
fantastic.
I might use it.
Rhonda,
yes.
I think Becca was talking about that you can use StreamYard and go through it and still go live.
Well, I was thinking about that because I don't understand why I can't go live when I go live through StreamYard all the time. So I'll
might ask Becca, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that out. So, but yeah, I mean, either way, all the lives that we can get, if we can all get something going live, the more the better. So
it'll be awesome.
So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Just Rhonda, and we all appreciate the hard work that you're putting in with the Daniel Hortzall case. Oh boy, that's a complicated one. That's a shocking and disgusting case.
It is. Thank you. And I have to thank also Cherie, who's an amazing researcher, and Alice for helping. I can't do this by myself, so I also want to thank them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Just Rhonda. And Neverly, how about yourself?
Hello, all is well. Pushing through, enjoying all the videos that Jack's been streaming. Dr. Silkman, as always, thank you very much for your hard work and putting all this together. Yeah, pleasure. And I hope you're doing well as well, by the way.
Yeah,
and just
slowly getting there. Getting there.
Good. Yeah, just the more you watch these documentaries, the more you know. Even though your eyes are gonna get bigger and bigger, but guess what? There's always something that's like so shocking, and it seems like there's a bottomless pit of all these shocking moments in real life that happen. So as hard as it is to watch, it's really educational.
Yes, yeah, it is very much so. Yeah. And the other important thing is that the sad situation regarding Brendan Dassey is not unique. It has happened to so many young men, especially young men of low IQ and intelligence, that are very, very vulnerable to the Reid technique. It's certainly a shocking eye-opener, that is for sure.
Yeah, and when you watch other shows, besides Ma'am, it's kind of nice in a
Yes.
way that you're educated enough to recognize the read technique from the get-go.
Correct.
Oh, starting friendly, getting closer, touching the body part, getting nasty, getting out of the room, offering something to. I mean, there's like boom, 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 boom. These are the points. So,
Correct.
as I said,
Correct.
I wish I could take some
Correct.
comfort in that, but you can't because you know
Yeah.
what's coming.
Correct. Correct. Thank you very much, Everly.
You're
Susan.
welcome.
Susan.
Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel.
Better
I
late than never.
slept a little late this morning.
No problems at all. No problems at all. How are you coming along?
Oh, I'm doing fine, thanks. I'm just trying to get some coffee into my body.
Yep,
So,
totally understand. Totally understand. Thank you
that's
so
about
much.
all I got right now. Thank you,
No,
Doctor.
no problems at all. Thank you very much, Susan. Sammy, how about yourself?
I'm doing well. Looking at some new adventures work-wise.
Yes, yes.
And also would like to mention to everyone out there, in case they don't know, because not everyone lives here in the States, we did have a building collapse in Miami, Florida.
Yes. Oh, my God.
Champlain Tower South. It was a 12-story building, and half of it is completely collapsed. But I am saying this because if you know anyone who was either visiting there now or going to be staying there for any length of time, this is right off of the shore, and there's 159 missing. I'm going to check on this some more later, but for confirmed deaths, and it's something that's just horrific. And I just want people to know, if you're in a high-rise building of any kind, this one has a 40-year recertification, which they were in the process of this year,
Yes.
and 10 years recertification after that, every 10 years. There was a focus for repair going on, but it was based at the rooftop. And what the inspectors are saying that they're finding now when they got down there was it looked like the garage collapsed down into a hole.
Oh.
So they suspect saltwater intrusion. They suspect saltwater intrusion and erosion beneath the lower level, which was a ground level under the garage. So
it acted like a
but
sinkhole. Acted like a
yeah,
sinkhole. Nothing.
yeah,
Oh, no.
yeah. So anyhow, there is
Oh,
a family reunification center, and I want to just spat out the number just in case somebody knows somebody that is, because now I know we've got people that are being able to leave other countries and come here for vacation, and they very often go to Florida. But the number is 305-614-1819. And I say this because I also hear this wasn't only condos, but a resort as well.
Oh, dear. Yeah, it's a real worry. It's a real worry.
But everybody just say prayers that everybody gets accounted for in, the next day or two. So that's it. And how have you been doing?
Touch wood. I'm going back to the hospital on Tuesday for a review. So fingers crossed. I'm doing all the right things, but like I said, if you've ever had an ulcer on your foot, it takes forever to heal. That is for sure. But I'm doing all the right things, and I'm glad to be doing the podcast with the team. Keeps my mind on other things, which is great. Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, look, first of all, I'd like to thank our listening audience for coming along and being so interactive with the podcast. Thank you so much for all your questions. Really, really brilliant. If you've enjoyed what we've done, please subscribe and tell your friends and about our channel. We've got a great team of people, so passionate, and they love doing this thing. And for wrongful conviction cases, especially the Avery and Dassey cases, if you like what we do, please subscribe. Put your DNA on the thumbs up button. Let us know what we can do to improve. and we'll try and incorporate that to the best of our abilities. The only thing I like to finish off with is I like to thank the panel for their fantastic insight and questions and answers. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you ever have a chance, check out Devil's Knot on the West Memphis 3 and have a look at the comparisons about what happened to those 3 boys who got accused of brutal murders of those 3 young boys, all 8 years old, and what happened in the Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey cases. The parallels are scary, including one investigator who lost critical forensic evidence. They lost critical forensic evidence and they never submitted it to the crime lab because they lost it. Yeah, I just threw my hands in the air. You got to watch it. Thank you so much, guys, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much.
This has been a Foul Play production. Sugar.